The Boston Bruins lost at home in regulation for the first time this season last night at the hands of the Seattle Kraken. But don't let that distract you from a phenomenal first half for the Black and Gold. Let's get into it on today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Friday, January 13th. Oh my gosh, I just realized it's Friday the 13th. That's all right, no worries. And I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day, free and available wherever you get podcasts. So please do go to your Apple app, Spotify, Google, Amazon, Pocket Casts. Hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a thing. The podcast is also available on YouTube. And we are 22 subscribers away from 1,000. Just as a reminder, once we do hit that mark, I'll be giving away this Patrice Bergeron Tim Hortons mini stick. And be very much appreciated if you jump on there. Social media, you can find the podcast at Locked NHL Bruins on Twitter, Instagram, and you can find me, my dad jokes, hockey tweets at ENC McLaren. And if you were following last night, you saw me lamenting the Bruins' first loss in regulation time on home ice in 2022-2023 at the hands of the red-hot Seattle Kraken, backstopped by former Bruin who never played a game for the Bruins, Martin Jones in net. Jim Montgomery afterwards said it was their first regulation loss at home, but the 23rd game of the year at home. So they're fortunate in that one way. They're not happy at how they played. They're going to address it today in practice. They're going to regroup, and they'll be better Saturday night against Toronto. Now, the Bruins were playing their first game back from a week-long trip through California that they swept. They were coming off the emotional high of the Winter Classic, and they'd only practiced once in their time since beating the Anaheim Ducks on Sunday night. So maybe there wasn't so much physical fatigue, but definitely some mental barriers. Montgomery said, there were guys that were wide open at points. They weren't making plays that they previously had throughout the year. They were maybe 1 or 2 seconds late when trying to force plays, led to a lot of turnovers, and Seattle was able to transition on them and made good on their opportunities. Doesn't usually happen. The mental fatigue was real. The Bruins were just perhaps a bit lazy with their offense, and they were in the right spots at the right time. And Seattle's red hot. They've now won 7 consecutive games, 6 of which have come on their current road trip. They used their speed to limit Boston, and they gave Martin Jones the support he needed for the 27-save shutout, the first time the Bruins have been blanked this season as well. Montgomery gave a lot of credit to Dave Haxtell's side. Their team structure is excellent. Their speed defensively gave the Bruins a lot of problems. They were strong on the forecheck, in the neutral zone, and in Boston's end. And the Bruins were kind of one and done in the offensive zone. And it was a credit to how fast they played defensively. Shout out to Ron Francis, first of all, for grabbing Eli Tolvanen off the waiver wire. He's been sensational for Seattle since being claimed for absolutely nothing. He was free and available, like the podcast, on the waiver wire, just sitting there waiting to be enjoyed. Seattle took advantage, and he's been fantastic for them so far this season. Unicompetent made his NHL debut as fourth line center. 1 shot on goal, 2 hits, -1 rating in about 9 minutes of ice time. He did win 71% of his faceoffs, which was why he was placed in the lineup. Thomas Nosek, a bit banged up and ineffective in the dot as of late. Jim Montgomery did juggle his lines throughout the game, putting David Pastrnak up on the top line, bumping Craig Smith to the fourth line. And he also pulled a Patrick Roy by emptying his net with about 5 minutes to go, hoping to spark the team. There was not much urgency to their game. Had some great looks with the extra man, but fortunately it didn't work. The Seattle Kraken able to get the third goal with the empty net as insurance. Whatever it was lacking, the Bruins just didn't have that it factor that they've had all year, weren't able to turn it on in the third period and make that comeback. But, these games are going to happen. Again, coming off that California road trip, they've had a couple days off this week, weren't able to practice very much, and there was a bit of physical but more mental rust there, and hopefully the Bruins can regroup and get ready for tomorrow's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, which we will talk about later in the podcast. David Pastrnak, Patrice Bergeron led the way with 5 shots apiece. Not much happening from the blue line as only 4 defensemen recorded single shots. Forbort Clifton held off the board, and nobody else had more than 2 shots on goal. So it's one we kind of move on from, not allowing it to take away from Boston's sensational start to the season, or first half of the season, which we will take a look at here after the break. But first, today's episode is brought to you in part by Built Bar. Now, you've heard us talk about Built Bar for years here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Can't speak highly enough of this delicious yet healthy treat. If your goal, like mine, is to eat healthier in 2023, then you just have to try Built Bars. They're healthy and tasty. I don't know how they do it, but they nail it with every flavor, like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. They're all covered in 100% chocolate, but they're good for you. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. Now you don't need to wait around to get a box. We've talked about in the past how you can order them from built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. Walk to the pharmacy section of your local Walmart, grab a box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs, or go to Sam's Club and grab a 13-bar box. So they're available just to drive away. Go pick some up right now, and you can thank me later. All right, so the Bruins at the halfway point. We've officially played 41 games in the regular season, and they are the number 1 team in the NHL by several different metrics. They have 68 points, which is 9 ahead of the Carolina Hurricanes and the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Bruins have a game in hand on Carolina and 2 games in hand on the Maple Leafs as well. Their point percentage, .829. They have 27 regulation wins, which is tops in the NHL, 30 regulation or overtime wins. They are first in goals for. They are first in goals allowed. And they're just a touch below the Buffalo Sabres when it comes to goals for per game this season. Buffalo's at 3.83. The Bruins, after being shut out, are at 3.76. Goals allowed per game, however, they've allowed the fewest, 2.15. Only Dallas comes close at 2.58. Boston's power play is third ranked in the NHL. Their penalty kill is number one ranked. They rank fifth in shots per game, and they are allowing the eighth fewest shots per game at 29.4. That's an area that they could possibly tighten up in. But by all measures, it's a very successful start to the season so far. The talk coming in, of course, was how the Bruins might struggle with Brad Marchand on the shelf to begin the season after double hip surgery, Charlie McAvoy on the shelf after shoulder surgery, Matt Grzelcyk started as well, injured. But they have been kept afloat, or not even kept afloat. They've been guided successfully through these obstacles, primarily by David Pasternak's play. He's got 58 points through 41 games, among the league leaders, deserving of some Hart Trophy consideration, in my opinion. Brad Marchand, despite missing some games early on, despite still not being back to full efficacy after the hip surgery, 37 points in 33 games. And then they've gotten contributions up and down the lineup from Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci. Jake DeBrusk was having a fantastic season before he was injured at the Winter Classic. Taylor Hall's chipping in. Hampus Lindholm was huge early on with McAvoy out of the lineup. Pavel Zacha's having a career season. Charlie McAvoy with 23 points in 28 games since his return. Nick Foligno guiding the bottom six, having a resurgence, 18 points so far. Trent Frederick. The Bruins have indeed put in a full team effort and are as good and as deep as any team in the NHL. Now, of course, a lot of credit goes as well to Linus Ullmark. He took the loss last night, but he's now still 22-2-1 with a 188 goals against average and a 9.38 save percentage. That keeps him among the league leaders in goaltending. In fact, he is first in wins, one ahead of Connor Hellebuck in 5 fewer appearances. His 938 save percentage is tops among all starting goalies. His 1.85 goals against that, or 88 goals against average, is tops among all starting goalies as well. Jake Ottinger next at 2.28. Philip Gustafsson in Minnesota, 17 appearances, 2.17, which is pretty good as well. So Jim Montgomery deserves some Jack Adams love. Linus Ullmark should be a Vezina finalist at this point. David Pastrnak in contention for the Rocket Richard Trophy. You can make an argument for some Hart Trophy consideration. He's 4th in total points at the moment, and he is 2nd in goals behind Connor McDavid. Points per game, 1.41, which puts him 6th behind only Tage Thompson, Nikita Kucherov, Leon Draisaitl. Nikolai Ehlers is up there, although he's only played 6 games. And, of course, Connor McDavid leads the way. He's the odds-on favorite to win awards in perpetuity, let's be honest. From my perspective, I had thought the Bruins would be pretty good to start the season. I wasn't all doom and gloom. I didn't really think the Ottawa Senators were a real threat to steal a playoff spot, or the Detroit Red Wings. perhaps you'd see some Metro teams move up as we have, like New Jersey, for example. To be this good, however, I didn't see coming. Nobody did. And at this point, it would be a disappointment if the Bruins were not to win the Stanley Cup in 2023. I'm just saying it. I was listening to a podcast this morning on the book The Secret. If you haven't listened to If Books Could Kill, it's a fantastic podcast. We all know The Secret. You visualize it, you name it, you claim it. I'm visualizing a Bruins Stanley Cup win in 2023. And based on how good they've been in the first season, yes, it's only the first half of the regular season. So much can happen between now and the playoffs. And of course, in the playoffs. But as we stand here on Friday the 13th, you don't want to make predictions on this day, perhaps. But there you have it. I believe the Bruins can and will win the Stanley Cup in 2023. Next up is a game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll talk about that briefly here in a moment. This episode is also brought to you in part by BetOnline. They're your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. If you want to put some money down on the Bruins winning the Cup or David Pastrnak winning the Rocket Richard Trophy, you can do so at betonline.net. They've also got all your props for the NFL playoffs, NBA, Major League Baseball season coming up. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Just head to their website today. Use your mobile device to learn more at BetOnline, where the game starts. So tomorrow night at TD Garden, the Boston Bruins will be hosting the Toronto Maple Leafs, the second place team in the Atlantic Division. Later on today, I'm going to be recording a bonus episode with Arun Srinivasan, an old friend from The Score. He's going to talk about the Maple Leafs more in depth, but just a quick preview for you right now. Leafs 6-3-1 over their last 10 games. They did lose last night as well, failing to gain ground on Boston, losing to Detroit. We all know who their stars are: Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews. Although he's missed the past couple of games, he is likely to play tomorrow night, but there's a possibility that he won't. William Nylander, John Tavares, starring for them. Obviously a very top-heavy team. They've been getting pretty good goaltending this year from Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov. I think it was Samsonov in net last night. We're likely to see Matt Murray. Tavares red hot with 9 points in his last 5 games. For the Bruins, David Pastrnak not far behind, 7 goals, 8 points in his last 5 games. Leafs are 10th in goals for per game, 3rd in team defense, which is a bit surprising. So it could be a tighter affair than we're used to. Back in November, of course, the Leafs beat the Bruins 2-1. That came the day after the Mitchell Miller signing. That whole saga was hanging over the Bruins as they visited Toronto on a Hockey Night in Canada night. So just intense spotlights on all the players. So unnecessary. Bruins will again be on Hockey Night in Canada, but this one will be, of course, in Boston, which will be cool to see the Bruins featured on Hockey Night in Canada on home ice. And hopefully they can get back to their winning ways against Toronto. Look out for that bonus chat with Arun dropping probably tomorrow. And thanks again for making Locked On Bruins part of your day every day. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, especially to the YouTube channel. And I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Such a pleasure to chat Bruins hockey on a daily basis. And I thank you so much for joining me here on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.